Now, we want to talk today about a player who is one of Ligue 1's more unheralded players. He's playing extremely well at the moment, and he is an incredible story because the Lille midfielder Nabil Bentaleb very nearly lost his life 2 years ago after suffering a heart attack. That was in 2024. He incredibly resumed his football career 8 months later. He scored in his comeback match against Rennes for Lille. And Bentaleb is playing some fantastic football. I commentated the weekend before last as Lille won away to Rennes. He was terrific. He played really, really well, was probably Lille's outstanding performer on Sunday as they won 2-1 away to Marseille. Now, this is a guy who's had an interesting career. He's played, I think, 58 times for Algeria so far. Started his career actually in England at Tottenham. Moved to Schalke in Germany, briefly was at Newcastle and Angers, joined Lille in 2023. And like I say, this season he has really returned to a very, very high level. He's got this very upright play, sort of style of play. He's got superb technique, long passing range, and he could feature quite strongly in the World Cup with Algeria. He's been more of a sort of fringe player in the last year or so, but there is a suggestion that he could really become a leader in Vladimir Petkovic's Algeria side. Tom, I think you've been following Nabil Bentaleb's story fairly closely in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I wrote a piece about his comeback for The Athletic, which came out last year. Spoke to his brother, Karim, spoke to some of the people he worked with during his rehab. And it is just the most remarkable story. I mean, you know, you go through something like that and initially it's a question of whether or not you're going to survive. And then it's, you know, whether or not you're going to be able to have the kind of life that you had previously. You're going to be able to do the things that you did previously. And I think initially the thought of resuming his career was very far away, but then bit by bit, step by step, he, you know, started his rehab and started to follow this very long path that he hoped would bring him back to being a professional footballer again. And I spoke to the physio he worked with, a football coach who he worked with, and you know, this extremely painstaking process. You know, physio work in the gym and long runs in parks around Lille, and then getting back onto the football pitch and, you know, feeling the ball for the first time, and right up to that incredible comeback away at Rennes last season where he comes on and scores with one of his very first touches of the ball. You know, an incredible story, and one that inevitably calls to mind, you know, other comparable stories, Christian Eriksen being the one that I think is probably the most resonant, and Bentaleb was actually treated by the same doctor who treated Christian Eriksen, and Eriksen, you know, played a part in facilitating that contact. So yeah, an incredible story, and it's impossible not to think about it when you see him now, and you know, you wouldn't know that he'd ever been away. He is such a boss in that part of the pitch. Whether he's playing alongside a very experienced player like Benjamin Andre or a much younger player like Ayoub Bouyadi, you know, he's extremely consistent. Those long raking left-footed passes, and I guess it would just be the final chapter in this incredible story if he is able to make it to the World Cup with Algeria.
Yeah, it is remarkable, Andy, to be able to play again at that level, you know, after suffering a heart attack. Not only like physically that your body is able to cope with it, but mentally as well. I was listening on the radio, and his former teammate Samuel Umtiti was saying that it's not something he'd worry. Like, he's such a laid-back guy that he wouldn't worry about it. But I mean, you know, I have to admit, I have a bit of a sore back sometimes when I play golf, and I worry about that. Like playing golf with you, Andy, today. I'm like, oh, did I tweak it? But Nabil Bentaleb, you know, clearly you look at his performances. He has absolutely, you know, put it out of his mind, and physically he's in an amazing place.
Yeah, you're right. That is incredible to be able to do that, to be able to keep playing the game, a game which demands so much of you in terms of cardio, you know, during the game, to be able to not think about that and keep going. he's I was say quite a funny player. I mean, he's quite a languid sort of playmaker, Nabil Bentaleb. He doesn't necessarily give you the impression that he's sprinting around everywhere.
No.
He kind of has quite an easy running style and just a lovely passer of the ball on that left foot of his. What's quite funny, interesting about Nabil Bentaleb is he is only 31. I mean, I was looking at his record at international level because we're talking about him maybe coming back into the Algeria squad. I mean, he actually played at the 2014 World Cup when he was I think only about 20. He was only about 20 back then, and he, you know, maybe his international career never quite took off in the way one might have thought it would have done. I can remember seeing him play at the AFCON in 2015. He didn't play in the Algeria team that won the AFCON in 2019. He's hardly really played for his country over the last 6 years. He was involved in the team up until for a spell he came back, and then he had this accident. He did feature in a few games at the tail end of last year, but he wasn't at the Cup of Nations recently in Morocco. But you look at that Algeria team, which I think kind of underperformed a little bit, albeit beaten by a very good Nigeria side in the quarterfinals in Marrakesh. But there's definitely space for a player like him, I think, in that team. I mean, there were, you know, Ismail Ben Nasser is probably a key cog in that Algerian side. Hicham Boudaoui of Nice is playing for them and is not a bad player, but I think there's room for him in the squad, and I think that he would complement the younger players in front of the two deep in midfield very well, because they've got Faris Shaibi, ex-Toulouse, now at Eintracht Frankfurt, who's a very nice player, and in particular Ibrahim Maza, who is an absolutely brilliant player. And I'm saying this now, the guy that Bayer Leverkusen signed to replace Florian Wirtz, and is a guy who's going to have a huge future, a very young player. So, you know, I think Bentaleb's experience could complement those guys very well. But if he does go to the World Cup, I'd be curious to see how much he would actually take to the field. He might not be a first choice player, but listen, he might get to come up against Lionel Messi, so that would be wonderful to see as well. And of course, Algeria in the same group as Argentina. It would be lovely to see.
All right, we will watch this space, see if Bentaleb gets to play in the World Cup. It would be a fantastic story if he does.